Hilchos, Erchin, Vacharamin, Perek Shmini. The laws of the valuation vows and dedication vows, chapter 8. Today is the final chapter of the Rambam's 6th book. We're making a siyum, a conclusion of yet another book of Rambam. The topic is Hekdesh, making things holy to the temple. And the question is, how do you redeem something from Hekdesh? Once you make it holy, how do you buy it back? That's the first half of this chapter, is dealing with some more laws about buying things back from Hekdesh. And then we're going to move on and close the chapter with how we apply these laws nowadays when there's no Beis HaMikdash. What do you do if somebody makes something holy? And then Rambam will conclude, as he always does, every book with a ethical approach or perspective on the whole idea of making things holy. So the Rambam begins, Halacha Aleph, B'chamisha Asar Ba'adar. On the 15th day of Adar, that's the day after Purim, Beis Din Nifnin, the court, the high court, would turn their attention. This is like what they would do all day. Lechapes v'livdoik al tzarchei tzibur ve'al inyanei ha'ekdeshes. To search and to check any communal needs, specifically matters relating to consecration. U'boitken aleya v'dershin v'chayker, they would check into it, they would investigate, they would inquire. U'paydim es ha'ekdeshes v'sacharamin. This was the time of year when they would conduct all the redemptions of consecrated property or dedication offerings. V'goyvin es ha'erchin ve'es hadamim mikol hachayav behen. This is also the time of year when they would collect the erech and the damim vows. That's the monetary vows that are either made based on Torah value or on market value. Whoever promised during the year to give this kind of a vow, this was the time of year when they would worry to collect them. Why this time of year? In order that everybody would be able, asid litain trumas hashkalim lechazek es beis Elokeinu. So everybody would be ready to give the half shekel donation to strengthen the house of Hashem. In other words, this was the time of year when they would give the half shekel coins. Just before the beginning of the month of Nisan, that's when the communal half shekel coins, which would provide for the sacrifices all year, were given. This was also the time, once Jews were giving money, everybody should be ready to give all their monetary donations, so they would redeem Hekdesh, they would fulfill all pledges of monetary vows made throughout the year. Halacha Beis, Ein poidin es ha'hekdeshos ela b'shleisha b'kiyin. In general, when you decide the value of a consecrated property for redemption, it has to be done overseen by 3 experts. Similarly, when the court steps in and expropriates or appropriates movable property as a collateral for somebody who pledged a vow. We saw in chapter 3 that if somebody pledges to give money to the temple and he didn't give it, the court goes down and takes whatever they want. They can take everything as collateral. So how do you decide what's worth the vow? They have to also estimate it with 3 people. Get an appraisal, and they would decide this watch is worth half the vow, this pen, this car, and they would take as they needed to fulfill the vow. Also, when you estimate the value of an animal or any other movable property, you need to do 3 experts appraisal. But when you evaluate the value of a piece of real estate, or if ever somebody made a vow to give his Torah-based value and they had to take the value from his real estate. In other words, whenever real estate is involved with hekdesh, with consecrated property, temple treasury, ein marichin oisan ela ba'asara. You have to have 10 people involved in the redemption process, ve'echad mehen kohen, and one of them has to be a kohen. Shaharei kohen kasav b'parsha, because in the Torah portion about this, it says the word kohen. So this is a special law. Some say it's rabbinic, some say it's even biblical, and you have to have 10 people. Similarly, when somebody says, I want to give my market value to the temple, or somebody else's market value to the temple, or the market value of my hand or of my foot to the temple, when the court evaluates how much he's worth or how much his hand or foot is worth, they also have to use 10 people. One of them is a kohen. Halacha Gimel, whenever somebody would redeem consecrated property from the temple treasury, whether it's landed property, real estate, or movable, the way it would go was, it wasn't a quiet affair. Even though the Rambam said in chapter 3 that only real estate would get a 60-day announcement period, but even movable property would also get somewhat of a public auction. This way, the temple treasury can get the most bang for their buck, right? If there's a bunch of people that are going to be bidding for the right to redeem it from Hekdesh, they'll probably get a higher amount. So Machrizan Alei and Bifnei Kol Habayim Lifters, they would announce in front of all people who would come to redeem it, and they made an auction. Amar Echad. And the thing with auctions was that the temple treasury always got the highest bid. Amar Echad, if one person said, Hareihin Shali be'eser slayim, I'll take this for 10 silver coins. Va'amar Echad be'esrim, va'amar Echad b'shloishim, va'amar Echad ba'arbayim, va'amar Echad b'chamishim. A second guy said, I'll give 20. Third guy said, I'll give 30, 40, 50. You have 5 guys bidding over it. Each one is increasing the price by 10. So now, at this point, the temple treasury has been promised 50 silver coins maximum. If the guy who bid 50 then retracts, says, you know what, never mind, I don't want to buy this, we're going to force him to at least pay 10, because that's the amount he promised over and above the last bidder. So if he retracts, Hekdesh will lose 10 coins. So we force him to pay 10 silver coins. And then we give the property to the guy who said 40. So temple treasury walks away with 50. 10 from this guy, 40 from that guy. If after the 50 guy retracts, the 40 guy also retracts, we take 10 from him also. And we give the consecrated property to the 30 guy. So you go back and back till the first guy, so that the temple treasury never walks away with less than the highest bid. If even the first guy who promised 10 also retracted, then the whole auction is over. We try again. We announce a second time, and we sell it. We see what it was sold by. If it ends up being sold for less than 10, we have the 10 guy pay the difference of whatever Hekdesh didn't get. So if the 10 guy retracted, and in the end it was only sold for 5, the 10 guy has to pay 5. When do we follow this principle of reduction for people that back out of the auction? It's only if they retract one after the other. But if a bunch of people retract at once, the difference that Hekdesh is going to lose is divided between them all. Ketzad, what does this look like? The Rambam has to draw up another example. Not going up by tens. He gives it a little simpler. Amar Harisha, and the first guy says, Hareyu shali be'eser. I'm going to give 10. The Amar Hasheni be'esrim, the Amar Hashlishi be'arba ve'esrim. Second guy says 20, third guy says 24. So we have 10, 20, 24. Right now Hekdesh is promised 24. The Chazar by Hashlishi v'Hasheni ke'echad. Second and third bidders back out at once. So now it's come down by 14. So who's going to pay that difference of 14? So instead of telling the second guy to pay 10, third guy to pay 4, since they both retracted at once, we divide the difference between them. You give it to the first guy who promised 10, he's giving his full 10. Second guy and third guy each get 7 coins to pay, and if need be, we take a forcible collateral from them. So that in the end, temple treasury walks away with 24 that it was promised. Or if all 3 retract, and the Hekdesh only succeeds in selling it somebody else for 3, so now it lost out on 21 because it was promised 24. All 3 guys backed out. A fourth guy showed up, paid only 3 coins for it. They're missing 21. So all 3 now have to pay, make up the difference equally. 7, 7, and 7 for 21. You follow this process always. Halacha hey. We mentioned before, Habaylim koidmin l'chol adam, twice in the earlier chapters, that when it comes to redeeming consecrated property, the original owner of the article, gets first rights. Why? Because they always add a fifth. And remember that in the Torah, a fifth really means a quarter. Where's my picture from the fifth yesterday? Oh, here you go. A fifth really means you have to add a quarter of the principal. This way, in total, it's 20% of the total. So because the owners are going to be adding a fifth to their price, we give them first rights. However, the fifth which they have to give doesn't have to be applied to any higher bids made by any other potential redeemers. Only, the fifth is only applied to the original bid that they entered. What does that mean? Keita, let's describe this case. Amru habaylim, Harei ze shalanu be'esrim, uba echad va'amar harei shali be'esrim. The owners say, I'll give 20. Somebody else says, I'll also give 20. Habaylim kaidmin. So the owners come first. They're going to be giving a fifth, 25 in total. What if the owner said, I'll give 20? Somebody else said, I'll give 21. So he seems to be going a little higher than the owner, even though the owner, in the end, will be giving 25. So who do you follow? So the Rambam says, if the owners are quiet, don't add anything, they still get it for 25, because 25 is higher than 21. But if the owners counterbid, they add even one copper coin to the 21. They say, you know what, 21 and a pruta, they have to now give 26 and a pruta. Where do we get 26 from? So the Rambam says, the 5 which they were going to add for the 5th always remains on the side. They have to always add that in. The 21 and the copper coin which they bid themselves. And the 5 as the 5th of the original bid which they entered, which is 20. But just because they added, the 5th doesn't get added to proportionally. Uba shlishi v'amar be'esrim v'shalish. Uba revi v'amar be'esrim v'arba. Uba chamishi v'amar be'esrim v'chamesh. You have the owner saying, 20. Some other guy saying 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. You have a whole bunch of bidders. So now really, you have somebody that's actually countering the owner in its fullest sense. Because the owner said 20. Even if he adds a 5th, it'll be 25. Now there's somebody else at the table who's also offering 25. So says the Rambam, if the owner adds to their bid 25 and even one copper coin, now we force them to give 30 and a copper coin. Why 30? They promised only 25. Because the 25 is their bid. 25 and a copper coin which they volunteered themselves. And the 5 is the original 5th which they promised. That still stays. That, in other words, once they enter their original bid, whatever the 5th of that bid is always going to be added to their final bid. But we never go up. The owner never has to add a 5th to the higher bid. They have to add the original 5th of what they originally promised is what they add to their higher bid than the last bid if they want to. Says that Rambam, when do we say this whole back and forth auction? We follow these rules. If it wasn't estimated or evaluated by 3 experts. But if it was appraised by 3 experts, and they said that actually the highest current bid, before the owner's bid, the highest current bid is the actual value, then if the owners go up that bid, even over with a copper coin, they have to add a 5th over the final bid, because that was the established worth of the property. Which would come out to be 31 and a dinar and a copper coin, which is, if you include the 25, the full 25, a 5th of that, which with a quarter of that, comes to 31 and a dinar and a pruta. Halacha zayin. Let's say the consecrated property was not evaluated. The owners offered 20, somebody else came and gave 25. The owners were quiet, they didn't say anything. The owners still get first right. So here's the owner saying 20, someone else saying I'll give 25. The owner is still going to get it because in total he's going to give 25, as we just said. The owners come first. They're also going to have to give 25 because of the 5th. Once somebody else comes and offers 26, he comes first. If the owners want to add to that even one copper coin, they win. They have to give now 31 and a pruta, 26 and a pruta, which they promised, and the original 5, which was their 5th. When we follow this path, always and forever, that's the way it goes. As long as the higher bid isn't going to give more than what you would give with the 5th, you get it. If they do go higher than that, you have to outbid them in order to get it, and always add your original 5th. And now we segue to the second half of this chapter, dealing with consecration nowadays. It says that Rambam, ideally, ein makdishin v'lei ma'arichin v'lei machrimin bizman hazeh. Nowadays, we don't consecrate properties, we don't pledge Torah-based value vows, we don't do dedication vows nowadays. She'ein sham mikdash b'chatainu. Unfortunately, because of our sins, we don't have a holy temple kedei lechazek es bitkoy, to maintain its upkeep. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash, so we don't give hektish. If somebody did, for whatever reason, consecrate something, or pledge a vow, or make a dedication offering, so what do? If it's an animal, you have to lock it in a cage till it dies on its own. There's no sacrifice, you can't bring it as a karban. If they were produce or clothing or utensils, leave them till they rot. If there was money or other metal utensils, destroy them by throwing them into the Dead Sea or the Mediterranean Sea. If you consecrated or dedicated a slave who had already taken upon himself the mitzvahs, as a Jewish slave must do, you should redeem the slave, free him, and the money which you paid for his redemption should be thrown into the Dead Sea, kishar damim ve'erchin shel zman hazeh, like any other money used in Torah-based value vows, market-based value vows that are made nowadays. If the slave was idol-worshipping Gentile still, then we use the expression of, you shouldn't raise him from a pit, nor should you throw him down into the pit. In other words, don't get involved with him. Leave him as is. Halacha Yud mutar lifdais hahekdeshes bizman hazeh lechatchila va'afilu bipruta. We learned the other day that when you redeem hekdesh, ideally you should redeem it for its worth. Figure out its worth, that's what you should pay. After the fact, if you transfer the holiness onto even the smallest copper coin, it's also okay, but not ideal. Nowadays, says the Rambam, lechatchila, even initially, you can transfer the holiness of something holy onto the smallest copper coin, and throw it into the Dead Sea. The Chachamim danu, the sages, however, said, they ruled, to give it some publicity, at least give 4 silver coins. That's the minimum you should transfer holiness onto. Aval bizman hamikdash, but in the times of the Holy Temple, when you had the proper Beis HaMikdash and the whole system was in place, ideally, as an initial preference, only redeem hektish for what it's actually worth, as we explained. If somebody declared a dedication offering without defining what it should be, in chapter 6 we saw there's 2 types of cherem to Hashem, cherem to Kohanim. He didn't say anything. He said cherem, dedication offering. So according to the Rambam, when you say cherem undefined, it goes to the Kohanim. Now usually it would go to the Kohanim who were that week serving in the temple. But which Kohanim do you give it to nowadays? So the Rambam says you give it to the Kohanim that are in your area. But if you declared a cherem over a field, not movable property, over a field, with no definition, or you clearly said it's going to the Kohanim, ein a cherem. In this case, it's not a dedication offering. The whole idea of cherem applying to fields only applied when Yovel was being observed in Israel, when most Jews were living in Israel. However, outside of Israel, if you declare real estate cherem to the Kohanim, even nowadays, and we treat it as movable property in Israel, and it should be given to the Kohanim. And now the Rambam concludes with a general perspective on these laws. Halacha Yud Beis, afal pi shehahekdeshes v'hacharamin v'ha'erchin mitzvahs. Even though it's true that consecrating property, making dedication offerings, pledging vows to give your value or someone else's value to the temple, even though these are all mitzvahs, and it's even good, it may be even proper for a person to behave in this way, to subdue his Yetzer Hara, so that he not be stingy, and he should fulfill that which the Nevi'im, the prophets, commanded us, to honor Hashem from your money. Nevertheless, if you never ended up in your lifetime consecrated anything, or making a vow to give somebody's value, or making a dedication offering, there's no problem. Torah itself testifies and says, if you withhold yourself from making promises, from making vows, no sins involved. The Rebbe contrasts this halacha to the halacha at the end of the laws of vows, where the Rambam says you shouldn't make any vows at all. If you make a vow, it's like building a bama. So the Rebbe says that's for a person who doesn't even worry about being stingy. If you don't have a worry of being stingy, you shouldn't make any vows. But even if you do have a worry of being stingy, and you would think that you should make vows to stop yourself from being stingy, to purposely make pledges to give money away, here the Rambam is saying if you didn't do that, it's also fine. It's also okay. And even if you do, says the Rambam, never should a person consecrate or dedicate all of his property. If you do that, you're actually transgressing the Torah's intent. This is the verse about cherem. It says, you consecrate or you dedicate from all that which is yours. It doesn't say consecrate everything that's yours, from what you have. As the sages explained. Says the Rambam, somebody who does that is not acting piously, he's acting foolishly. He's actively destroying all his money. He's going to need people to support him. And he's putting himself in an untenable situation.
Not only that, he has a family.
Because the family is neglecting them. We don't have mercy on them. The Rebbe Rashab, his yahrzeit was yesterday, 2nd of Nisan. He used to say, if the Torah says you can't have mercy on somebody, you can imagine how big of a Rachmanus it is. About such a person and others, the sages said, Chasid shaita miklal mevali olam. A foolish, pious person is among those who destroys the world. He thinks he's being a chassid, giving away all his money. You have mechalei olam, destroys the world. Mivalei. There's two texts. Yeah, but it's a very strong statement. You think you're being a chassid, but you're not being a chassid. You're being a fool. Ela kol hamefazer mamoine b'mitzvahs. Al yefazer yeser mechaimesh. The Rambam rules. Anybody who gives out his money for mitzvahs should never give more than a fifth. 20% is the maximum. V'yiyah k'mei shetzivu neviim. He should behave as the neviim command. It's actually a verse in Tehillim. Mechalkel dvarav b'mishpat. Arranging your affairs with good judgment. Bein b'divrei Torah, bein b'divrei olam, whether it applies to Torah matters or to worldly matters. Afilu b'karbanos she'adam chayav bahen. Even when it comes to sacrifices, which you have to bring. Harei chasa Torah ala mamain v'amra sheyavi kifi misas yadai. Torah is merciful on your money. It allows you to fluctuate according to your financial capacity. If you're rich, bring an animal. You're poor, bring birds. You're poorer, bring flour. Kal v'chaymer. How much more so lidvarim shalei nischayev bahen ela machmas nidrei, things which you're not obligated to bring only because of your vow. Shalei yinder ela karoi. Ideally, you should only promise a way that befits your financial standard, which is no more than 20%. Shenemar, as it says, ish kematnas yadai, each man should give according to the gift of his hand. Kemisas kevirkas Hashem alekecha asher nasan lach, according to the blessing of Hashem which He has given you. So the Rambam bottom line over here says no more than 20%. Elsewhere, the Rambam writes that if you give more than 20% for tzedaka, it is midat chasidut. It is piety. So the commentators wonder, how could we resolve this? The Rambam over here says, einzu chasidus ala shtus. And by tzedaka he says, no, it's actually midas chasidus. So the Rebbe has a wonderful talk where he says that here the Rambam, if you notice carefully, doesn't mention the word tzedaka. He's talking about vows. You make a pledge to give something to the temple. When a person makes a pledge, he's really focused on himself, trying to bring himself benefit, train himself not to be stingy, refine his character. When you're giving tzedakah, the focus is on somebody else. You're not occupied with yourself. You care about the person who's getting the tzedakah. And therefore the Rebbe says, in the laws of Erchin, Vacharamin, in the laws of dedicating things to Hashem, the Rambam says no more than 20%. When you're focused on yourself, you should be limited. But when you're focused on others, and you want to give more than 20% and you can, definitely it's okay, and it's actually midat chasidut. As a matter of fact, in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe writes, there's even a third level. That when a person realizes that his life is at stake, when he's trying to do tshuva, kol asher la'ish yitain ba'ad nafsho. The Torah says a person will give away everything he has. It's like when a child is sick, chas v'shalom, chas v'shalom. You don't spare a penny. Nobody says 10%, 20%, I'm only going to give this much, that much. Child life is at stake. So physical life, it's that way. Spiritual life, it's for sure true. If our spiritual soul life is at stake and we have to give tzedakah for whatever reason to achieve atonement, there's a level where a person would say, I'll give everything I have. But here we're talking about the regular vows, so we say 20%. And with this, Brich Rachamana Desayan, blessed is the Muslim grants us assistance. Nigmar Sefer Shishi Be'ezras Shakai, we have concluded book 6 with the help of Hashem. Uminyan Prakov Shleisha V'Arba'im Prakim, the number of chapters was 43 chapters. Hilchos Shvuos Shnei Masar Prakim, the laws of vows, oaths, 12 chapters. Hilchos Nedarim Shleisha Asar Prakim, the laws of vows, 13 chapters. Hilchos Nazirus Asara Prakim, the laws of the Nazirite vow, 10 chapters. Hilchos Erchin Vacharamin Shmeina Prakim, the laws of valuation vows, dedication vows, were 8 chapters. Mazel Tov, a huge Mazel Tov for concluding yet another 6th book of the Rambam's Mishneh Torah. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov.